Hey now, it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and man, do we got a lot to talk about today. I've been sitting here, man. You ever had like something that you wanted to say, right? Man, that's some profound shit. I really need to say that on the podcast, and then you just kind of keep sitting there sipping your coffee or doing whatever you're doing. You go do something else, and then you forgot what you were gonna say that you were holding on to it. So I get the feeling that at some point during this episode that incredibly profound idea that I had, that message that I wanted to give you guys is gonna come back to me. But yeah, man, there's two big stories coming out of the weekend so far, and we'll get into those. And if you guys have not had the opportunity to check out my show, the Mike and JD show this week, it was basically a brace for impact, to be honest with you. Because I welcome on my uncle, my much older uncle, BQ. No, just kidding. No, I welcome on BQ, man, the OG of TNA podcasting, and because he was dropping some truth bombs in the Impact Lounge Facebook group, and I know some of you guys are members of that Facebook page. I think I woke up on like Wednesday morning, and the headline of the group, it was like the first thing I saw in the morning, and the headline was uh the he just heard back from somebody from TNA, and the reason why the people that had been fired recently were fired is because they were not good at their jobs. And I was like, oh crap. And then he just kept putting comment after comment after comment, and I was like, oh my god. So I actually started putting some notes together, and I planned on like writing something for the Patreon about that, and then using it for this episode this morning, the Brace for Impact. But then like later in the day on Wednesday, JD texted me. He's like, dude, Andy's got a sleep study on Thursday night, and he goes, and I have to be there. Like, there's just nothing I could do. I was like, dude, fucking take care of Andy, bro. Don't worry about the stupid podcast, you know. And Andy's fine. He's doing good and everything like that. And so I was like, well, shit, I wonder if BQ's available to be on the show, because he and I have been playing kind of like not phone tag, but we've been talking back and forth for a while about doing a mailbag episode for the Impact Lounge. And I had already agreed to do the show, but we just never scheduled it. And he kind of put it out there to ask, he and I questions for a mailbag episode, and then we were going to schedule it at some point. And I was like, dude, can you come and fill in for JD? And then immediately after, we can hit the mailbag. And he just happened to be available. And I was like, oh, okay, nailed it. And so he was like the perfect guest. He had news, and plus we needed to do the mailbag episode anyway. And so he come on the show, man, and he dropped so much knowledge about what's going on in the inner workings of TNA that I don't think is actually out there anywhere else. Like, I know Mike Johnson's pretty good at getting some of that information. Sean Ross Sapp is good too, but I think Mike Johnson, as far as how the promotion is ran and like the promotional structure of the company, I think he does a little bit better job of getting that information. Sean Ross Sapp's good with like which contract is coming due and what and who's going where and all that. And I think it's because he's a very big sports fan, me too. And so that's why I follow both guys, and obviously Meltzer does really like in-depth, like long form stories. And so I think we need kind of like all three guys, right? Well, I don't think any of those three guys have the information that BQ dropped on our podcast. They just don't. They don't have the depth, the detail, um, and the inside knowledge of what we were able to release on our show this week. And so I'm very proud of that episode. So if you have not got a chance to check it out, please do. It's right here on the Patreon, but it's also on YouTube, and of course it's all over the Voices of Wrestling free feed. There's two different versions on their YouTube, so it's out there. And Jade or BQ is actually going to clip the entire TNA conversation that we had, and he's going to be putting that on the Impact Lounge as well. So a swig of coffee for the Impact Lounge, or a swig of espresso. But some of the things he was saying, I'm not going to rehash everything, but I just kind of want to give more my take on the things that he was talking about. So because I was the host of the show and he was my guest, and so I wanted him to do the talking. You know what I mean? Like I wanted him to have the platform to be able to tell his story about what he's learning about the inside of the company. So I didn't really I didn't really focus on my opinion so much. I was just trying to be a good host, and so, but this is my motherfucking show. So, so I think now is the time for me to kind of to discuss some of the stuff that he had been talking about. And so let's go ahead and get into the Scott D'Amore discussion. um and I don't think it wasn't meant to come off this way. Like when I talked to a buddy of mine that knows Scott a little bit, I didn't when I told him that we were going to be talking about kind of why Scott left and things like that, I didn't present it to him as it was going to be a D'Amore burial, because I didn't think that's what we were going to do. And then and that wasn't the intention of the information. And but but I think that's what it ended up being, and that was not intentional. But that's just the information that he had. And so but what he was trying to do and what we were trying to accomplish is I feel like, and I've been told this from a few different people now, that some of the negative slanted information that's been released to the media is coming from D'Amore's side. There's no way to really prove that, like, because you're not really gonna tie down Meltzer and like get him to reveal his sources, nothing like that. So it's not like a provable thing. So it's not even really reportable, right? But there is a feeling that the negative slanted information is coming from his side. Like like, and it wasn't even. I don't even think Meltzer like was attempting to go doom posting on TNA when he said this, but that's the way that it came off. But if you go back to from a couple of weeks ago, we covered it here on the episode. The whole TNA doesn't have anything booked past Tampa August 3rd, which, and he said that in at the end of May. And I was like, that's a pretty normal thing. And I just don't think that he knew that that's pretty normal. Like that's how the standard operating procedure for this company. So he reported that, and it at the same time, like these people are being released, and RD Evans quits, and we found out why he quit. It wasn't anything crazy. Like he just had another opportunity, right? Um, and it kind of made it seem like things were falling apart in the company, and that wasn't the case at all. And so, but that's the side of the story that had been released to the public. So what BQ did is he, talk to his people and to get a temperature of the room and to see exactly what's going on. And they really wanted to get this information out there, because right as of that point, there had only really been one side of the story. And it's like, no, nothing's falling apart. These people are trying to get this shit together. They're trying to regain control of the company, and get them on the right track. You know what I mean? And that's kind of that is kind of the message that BQ was just trying to convey. So these Anthem people are television people. They're not wrestling people. And I know that Anthony Ciccone is being compared to Jim Herd, and I think that's actually a pretty good comparison. I don't know if it's going to be if it's going to end up like the way that it ended up for Jim Herd, where he came in and he tried to make all these swooping and sweeping changes immediately, and he tried to market the television show to kids. He tried to change Ric Flair into Spartacus, and he was trying to get rid of Ric Flair, his top star. I don't think any of that's going to be happening with Ciccone. I don't even think that he's going to have a ton of stuff with the day-to-day operation and creative the way that Jim Herd did back in the day. I think he's just going to be kind of more of a 30,000 foot view of the company, while Ariel Schneer is going to have more of the day-to-day operations stuff. And people are going to be working through them. But I think what their focus is righting the ship. And that tells us that Scott D'Amore was not as successful as he made it seem to be. And we kind of knew that. It's not like this, like, heading into Hard to Kill, they took the entire fourth quarter off. Like, I think they did two shows, one in the fourth quarter, well, they did those UK shows, and then they came back, and they didn't do any regular tapings. I think they did a couple of things in Santino's gym. I think they had like Final Resolution, or I can't remember what the December show was, and they did Turning Point. And they're very small shows and negligible shows. All the storylines had kind of been paused. They basically took the fourth quarter off. They did a lot of recap shows as they were gearing up for this big change. And I don't think it appears to me that not everybody was on the same page with a lot of those changes. And Anthem really, from what BQ saying, Anthem really wants the television show to look a lot better and the production side of the house. And that just wasn't D'Amore's focus, right? I think D'Amore was more focused on like signing Will Ospreay, signing CM Punk, signing the unsignable guys, right? And then doing that and hoping that it would generate buzz and do all this stuff. When in reality, like if they brought CM Punk over and he's wrestling in front of nobody in 480p, I don't think that's going to get the company where he thought it was going to go, right? But these guys are TV people, and they just really want the TV show to look good, and they want people to be good at their jobs, and they want people to be held accountable when they're not being good at their jobs. For example, Dave Sahadi, the production of the show has just been horrendous for a long time, and like easily correctable mistakes are happening on the show, and nobody's being held accountable. And finally, these guys are coming in. It's like, look, if you suck, we're gonna get rid of you. Like they don't, and everybody makes fun of AEW for being all friends wrestling, and I think there was something to that. That kind of was happening in TNA with Scott D'Amore, hiring his friends, and even though his friends are not very good at the job, they're able to stick around and not be held accountable. Then there was some names that were told to me, and I'm not going to say the names in public. I think that's BQ's story to tell. And I think he's going to be releasing some of that. But there was a couple of people specifically that Anthem was not really happy with that hung on way too long. But Scott D'Amore, like, no, that's my friend. Like, I'm not getting rid of that person. Right. And I think you'll, if you tune into the Impact Lounge coming up, you'll hear BQ tell that story. And so now as far as the production overhaul and stuff like that I think that should be coming eventually, I'm going to take a wait and see approach. I want to be cautiously optimistic. I believe BQ sourcing on this. I do think that's the intention, but until it actually happens, I just have no faith that they'll be able to get that stuff done, because I have just not been impressed with their ability to get stuff done. Even since Scott D'Amore left, right? These guys move like molasses. I think a lot of the stuff that they could have done, they could have actually, corrected it. Like, with the venues, right? So BQ said that they're going to nicer venues probably in 2025, because Lou D'Angeli and the guy Greg Bag of Donuts that they have in place, or that they've had in place, they've kind of already booked through the end of the year, maybe not the complete end of the year, but like towards the end of the year. And that they're hoping to book nicer venues, not exactly bigger. And I want to make that distinction. I don't think that the plan is to run bigger arenas and bigger venues, although that story did come out earlier in the year, or I think actually last year, when they announced the TNA relaunch, and that they were going to the Palms, that they were going to try to work more venues like that, and that they were going to work bigger arenas. I don't think that's a smart idea for them, because that's exactly what happened with Bischoff and Hogan regime, as they were booking these big, and that's what's happening to AEW. They're booking all these arenas that they just can't fill, and they have all these high priced talents, and so they're losing their ass on the road. I don't think TNA needs to do that, but nicer TV friendly venues, I think, is what they need to focus on going forward. And that's kind of what they're saying they're going to do. And so I'm hoping that they get to that point, but we'll see. And it's going to take time to actually get there. This is just Mike, right? I don't like bullshit. I'm like, if you guys are going to do it, go fucking do it. I know it would suck to lose some money. They probably have deposits on some of those buildings that they've already booked. It can't be that much. I would say just scrap it. like you, if that's your plan, right? And you knew the plan a couple months ago, and you saw these dates booked and these venues booked, you'd be like, nah, son, we're not doing that. Let's scrap it and let's go ahead and execute the plan now. But they move so slowly. and it's very frustrating for me because I'm very much a guy that just likes to get after it. Like, let's go do it. And if we're gonna do it, let's be the fucking best at it. Let's go. I don't like waiting. But that's probably a more of a me thing. But yeah, it seems like, things should be looking quite a bit different going forward, starting in 2025. I do have a feeling that Full Sail deal, I think Meltzer reported, and I'm not going to pull up the newsletter again this week. I've done that lately, and I don't think that he had anything in there that was significant for us to talk about. But I do think that the Full Sail deal is not only not dead, I think that is looking good, to be like perfectly honest. And I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but just from different conversations with people and stuff that's been leaked out and things that are happening, I think Full Sail is still very much on the table, and in fact looks pretty good at this point. And I think that's the way that they need to go. I really do. I think that's the perfect spot for them. It makes all the sense in the world. Orlando is a wrestling town now, and it has been since TNA had worked there before. It's been a wrestling town forever. People say, "Oh, well, why would they go back to Orlando and do the same thing they were doing before when it wasn't working?" And it's like, the city wasn't the problem. The Impact Zone was never the problem. They just weren't putting anything good. They weren't giving people a reason to come watch. That was the problem. Now, if they get a good creative team in place, which I think they need help in that area, and we'll talk about, we'll get into that here in a minute. I think if you give some people something to watch and you make them prioritize your show, then they will show up. But that's on the company. That's not on the city. That's not on the fans. That's not a venue problem. That's a them problem. But they need to be in a place that looks nice on television. That has to be priority number one. Priority number one. It has to look like a major television show. It doesn't have to look like Raw or Dynamite, but it has to, and BQ said it on the pod. He said it has to look more like NXT and less like MLW, right? And I think they can get close to looking like NXT. And if they can get close to looking like NXT, and they got some, now they have some pretty decent name talent on the show, I think that they could, be in a position to be able to upgrade their television distribution. They can be in a position to do a lot of different things. And I think that's the hope going forward. Look, Invicta just signed a deal with CBS Sports Network. That is a pretty good upgrade over Access. It's not a significant television deal, but it is very much an upgrade over Access. But CBS Sports Network is not actually that huge of a network. And they when Bellator went there, that was a pretty big downgrade from Spike TV. And in fact, it was actually it was beneath Showtime as far as the show's popularity and the coverage that the show was getting. More people had access to Showtime, believe it or not. And Showtime's a pay station. But I think, or not more access, but more people watched Showtime. They watched Bellator on Showtime. More people watched it there than they did on CBS Sports Network. But it's still a pretty big upgrade over Access. So, but that tells me that that tells me that Anthem is open to putting their properties on other networks if the deal makes sense. And I don't get the feeling that Invicta is getting a lot of money from CBS Sports Network because they're not really paying a ton of money for broadcasting rights, because it's just not a huge station. It's not. They show, I think they have WNBA right now, but they might not have it going forward because WNBA, on their next TV deal that they just signed, is making a ton of dough. Is probably not going to be long for CBS Sports Network. But they still get, they still have when they have SEC football, it's the bottom barrel teams. And I think They show college football, but it's like no big teams, no big games. They show college basketball, but it's never really any big games, nothing like that. So it's like very kind of like much lower bar sports, not like FS1. FS1 is a pretty big sports station. It's like as far as the coverage goes, it's it's probably in between ESPN1 and ESPN2. That's where FS1 is at. And I think CBS Sports Network is probably closer to FS2 and ESPN like 3 and the Ocho and all that stuff. But so I think that Invicta getting a TV deal sends a signal out to everybody that TNA is in play. But no network is going to want it with the way that it looks right now, with the way that it looked in Cincinnati. 200 people in a bar sitting on their hands. And like legit, when I was saying 200 people, that was just what I thought it was. But actually somebody got the Polestar count, and Polestar is pretty damn accurate. They probably don't have the number of people that were comped. So that, like local businesses, whatever, local sponsors, but it was like 198. So that's when I said 200 people, it very much looked like 200 people to me. And that's exactly what it was, according to Polestar. So the show has to look much better if they're going to be able to sell it to a bigger network. And hopefully in 2025, we get to that. And then I hope that the schedule is, and I've been saying this for a long time, that monthly they go around, they do their pay-per-views and their TNA Plus specials. They'll go on it'll be one Saturday a month. Boom, they go live for that, and then Thursday live from like Full Sail or whatever, like Universal or whatever location they're going to be running out of that is a fixed location. But they can't go back-to-back nights anymore. Tonight Against All Odds was so sold out, jam-packed to the rafters. And one would say that they broke MLW's record, but MLW's record's fake. There's no way MLW sold 2,000 tickets. Swig of coffee for Carney Court Bauer. But in fact, I actually got a text early in the day yesterday that TNA had oversold Against All Odds, and then Gerard, who was there, said, "Yeah, that's like," he told me, he's like, "Hey guys, they oversold this building, and they're actually turning people who bought tickets are turning them away." I guess it came a little bit too late, and they oversold it. So I think those people had to get a refund, and they oversold general admission tickets basically. So, so they did a really good job selling tickets, but then like as people were leaving the show last night, Sam Letourneau was out there handing out free tickets to people that were exiting the building and hoping that they would come back for the TV tapings, because there's typically a significant drop off on night 2 from night 1. And so, and the television show looking nice is very important at this point. And I think it's, they always do very well in Cicero. And so I'm sure that there'll be, plenty of people there and it'll look pretty decent on television. But there's been a lot of towns that they go to where when the pay-per-view looks good, but the TV taping does not. And the TV taping's quiet and empty and all that stuff. So, but once they get that part cleaned up, I think they got a shot at doing some damage here. But